Hey, Nicole, what do you want to connect on today?
I would like to connect on the slavery themed engagement shoot. Yeah.
Okay.
He was no longer a slave. He was part of the family. What?
Nice.
And what would you like to connect on this week?
I would like to connect on trauma in the Black community, particularly around Black nerds. I got a lot of thoughts about that. So
yeah.
Let's spend some time talking about some things on the Hall Space podcast.
Sounds good.
It's about connections.
See you soon.
Welcome to the Hall Space podcast. It's about connections. I'm your host, Dr. Rich Hall, and this is a weekly conversation about whatever and however I see to connect things. For people who want to connect, chat, and learn a thing or two about a thing or two. Without further ado, let's start the show. Welcome to the Hall Space podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rich Hall, and I'm here with my lovely and capable co-host, Nicole.
Hey there. Welcome back to another episode.
Welcome to another episode of the show. We are very close to our 1 year anniversary.
Yeah.
And we're going to probably take next week off because Nicole's going out of town. But when we come back, we have something special for the anniversary
episode.
We're going to try to do a live episode.
Ooh.
So there will be some more news about that in a couple of weeks. Well, in a week, there'll be some news about it. And then in a couple of weeks, the live episode will happen.
Right.
That'll be our 1 year anniversary episode.
So exciting.
Yes. And we'll be trying to incorporate more of the visuals into the podcast because we've gotten some requests for that. And I know people like it. So,
Yay.
We're working on it. It's not as easy as I want it to be ultimately. So, work in progress.
Yep.
As it were. These things take time and energy, and
they do. And you're a whole person with a whole job,
2.5 jobs.
Family.
It's a whole thing to get. These are not easy to pull off, unfortunately.
Yep.
So, as we get into the show this week, we got a few topics here on the board, but first, an update.
We do have an update.
Nicole has finally watched The Rocketeer. And Nicole, tell the people what your thoughts are on Joe Johnston's The Rocketeer.
I am here to eat my words.
Here to eat the words.
I am here.
Let's just take a moment for that, ladies and gentlemen. These moments don't come around often enough. But Nicole is admitting that she is wrong.
Don't you slow clap me. You're enjoying this
just savoring
way
it. Let me savor it for just a moment.
Much.
Let me just savor it for a moment. That's all.
Can we move on?
I think we can.
I am here to eat the cat poop. The Rocketeer, I've watched it twice. It was good.
It was a solid film.
It was a solid film, especially for a film that was done in 1991.
Yes.
For me to be able to watch it in 2021.
And still enjoy it.
I enjoyed it.
And as I said, template for the Marvel movies.
It definitely was a template. After the second time I watched it, I watched the first Avenger right after that.
Captain America.
Yeah.
And saw the parallels.
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
Definitely.
I mean, if
Many
you feel
of the
like
parallels.
it, we could always do an episode about the parallels between the Rocketeer and
yeah,
I saw so many.
Definitely. Yeah, there were definitely a lot of parallels.
Definitely.
In it. Howard Hughes is in The Rocketeer.
Yep.
Doing the Howard Stark type character.
Yep.
He also has Peavy,
yeah.
who, aka Peabody, who is kind of his tech guy who's helping him put it together. He's a dashing hero. He's a little bit more
fighting Nazis.
They're fighting Nazis.
Yep.
Yes. He's a little more hero, sarcastic hero than Captain America was.
Captain America is
more true blue.
Yeah.
He had his moments for quips, but he was much more. Captain America is a much more sincere protagonist than I just blanked on his Cliff Secord. Cliff Secord was the Rocketeer. No.
Billy Campbell.
No, Billy Campbell's the name of the actor. The character is Cliff Secord.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right.
And he's a hotshot pilot who stumbles onto a secret
stunt pilot.
Right. Stumbles onto a secret jetpack, straps it to his back, and takes off into adventure.
But also falls in love.
Well, he was already in love with the beautiful actress.
Yeah.
And, their relationship predated the Finding the Rocket Pack, and it was on the rocks, as relationships in these movies often are.
It became on the rocks. I
thought it was a pretty legit argument between them. Not to fully spoil the movie for you guys, but they had an argument over, her career was important to her, his career was important to him.
And he's like, you're not here for me. And she's like, you're not here for me.
And
oftentimes it's like
he was a bit of a jerk about it.
He was a jerk about it. He was
Can't say I've never walked into one of those.
Oh my gosh. He was unable to read the room at some of those times.
Yeah.
And then in a way to apologize, he would overdo it.
Yeah.
So it's like,
or just do it in all the wrong ways. Like, you're still not reading the room, buddy.
Yep. And then she was overly dramatic, so she went and overdid it as well. And
right.
Yeah. So
but
I think
it's also film, so people overdo it in film.
Yeah.
To up the drama.
Yeah, and so it wasn't like the relationship part of it was. I normally don't care about that kind of stuff in superhero movies because it just gets uber mushy and you want to see fighting and stuff. But it was pretty.
It was pretty solid.
It was pretty solid.
A lot of moving parts, a lot of characters making decisions that led to the things that were happening.
Yep.
And ultimately, having to solve the big problem.
And everybody gets together to solve that.
And
big
a Nazi
problem.
Zeppelin flies over California. Yep. And, they have a fight atop a Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And they had planned on making it a franchise. Like, they had planned on an additional movie.
Sequel.
But unfortunately, it did not make enough money. It just did not resonate with audience. This was Disney before they bought Marvel. So Disney was trying really hard to court young males. Disney had young women on lock because it had all the princess movies.
Right.
So all the, cartoons were always appealing to women, but they could not get young boys.
They needed those superheroes.
They were trying to create their own superheroes at the time. And this was, 91. There weren't that many superheroes out.
No. Honestly.
Every now and again, we get a superhero movie.
Yeah. I enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
Just like I enjoyed First Avenger. I don't know if 12-year-old Nick would enjoy it.
Yeah.
The same way.
I enjoyed it. I absolutely adored it.
As a kid?
As a kid. I was in love with that movie. Yeah. Okay. No, it was among my favorite films.
Okay.
And then there's there's an unofficial trilogy of the Rocketeer. It's not a trilogy, but the Rocketeer, the Shadow, and the Phantom. The Phantom is not very good, as I recall. The Shadow is decent, but not great.
Are these true sequels?
No, they're not sequels to anything, but they're all pulpy superhero stories. Gotcha. That's what happens when, they were all trying to pull off. They were pulling these old pulp stories and trying to make
algorithm
new hero movies out of them. And some of them, the Shadow's kind of convoluted, but I still loved it.
Yeah.
The Phantom was just hard I remember it being hard to get through. I have not watched it in 20 years, so I'll probably revisit. I revisited the Shadow recently and was like, I dig this. I can see why other people wouldn't like it, and I'm not sure I would endorse it for you. It's one of those. It's like watching Dick Tracy. I liked it, but if am I gonna
I watched Dick Tracy
ruin my cachet
right
by telling you to watch it
because then if I don't like it right, you'll hear about it.
I'll hear about it. So one of the things that used to happen when Nicole and I dated was, we'd go to a lot of movies. That was pretty much the beginnings of our relationship, was attending films. That's what you do in your, in your late teens and early 20s, is go to movies, go to dinner. Those are the date options for the most part, for the basic date options for a stable relationship. We weren't what a lot of people talk about now. It's always weird to me when you see online, they're like, I want only a relationship where we're just taking trips. And it was I don't even know you yet. To be flying you to Dubai.
Hold on.
What if I'm stuck there with a person that I just don't really get along with because we had a good first interaction and I thought, hey, you want to fly to Florida with me? And then it's
let's get in a car and drive 15 hours together. And
and you could end up at a really bad time.
Seriously, you cannot travel with everybody.
You cannot travel with everybody.
You cannot travel with everybody.
And so it's weird that they, that there are people promoting this in their Twitters, and people are like, yeah, that sounds great.
I'm going to fly her out.
So much of what we talk about when it comes to relationships and how people start relationships sounds absurd when you've been in a relationship for a very long time, because you're like, that's not going to matter. Like, I mean, it would definitely be a trial by fire. And if it worked, high reward.
Right.
But if it didn't, such high risk.
Yeah.
Such high risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, a lot of that stuff where it's like, no, I want a guy who could take me to $1,000 dinners
and
or several $100 dinners.
On the risk scale is high
risky. Risk because you're stuck with that person.
Yeah,
until you put them on a plane.
It's not like a 2-hour movie where you could be like, have a nice life.
You're right. Okay. Or, you know, maybe an hour dinner, maybe an hour for dinner
or coffee.
And you do that a couple times, 2-3 times, and you're like, okay, so it's still working. Let's keep going. Let's keep moving forward.
Yeah.
But if it's like, okay, so we went out once, and now I want to treat you by taking you to Vegas. It's like, ooh, you could end up in a really bad situation with the person.
You really could.
Find out all kinds of bad things.
Well, and you also set this standard for these extravagant things.
Yes. Now I got to constantly live up to that.
You have to constantly live up to that. And then you're not enjoying the smaller things.
Yeah.
Right? And it's the smaller things that you get to do more often.
Yes. That's one of the things that I often think about when you see some of these like dating advice and they're like, well, you know, sometimes some of these dating advice people are like, when they're telling guys like, well, you know, be a little flashy, let her know. And it's like, I mean, you know, you definitely always put your best foot forward for sure. But don't establish a precedent that you can't maintain.
Right. So or that you don't want to maintain.
Right. Which can cost you some of these beautiful women that you might go after might be like, nah, I don't want to go to a simple dinner at an Applebee's.
Right.
But, you know, if you're the type of guy who just likes going to Applebee's and chilling at the bar.
Then you need to find a girl that likes to go to Applebee's. Find a girl that likes to go to Applebee's that you're also attracted to. Yeah.
Because you'll be shooting for this girl that has to go to Jeff Ruby's every time, has to go to.
Right.
You know, Ruth Chris, and that's what she thinks dating is.
Yeah.
And yet that won't be a standard you can maintain because, hey, that's a couple $100 every ticket. And you might not have it like that. And that's okay.
And perfectly fine. That. We save up for those moments.
Right.
But we make a better steak
at home. And not everybody goes.
No, right.
To those things. Not everybody is able to sustain that life.
Yeah.
As I've said before, I think the internet has created a false view of reality that people are often striving for something they see on the internet, not knowing that reality often does not reach for the average person.
Right.
That same standard. Now there are people who you will always have a world where people enjoy. You know, there are people dancing on yachts all the time.
Oh yeah.
And taking private jets and all of that. But the majority of us,
those
the
are
larger percentage of the society is not doing that, and that's okay. You know,
perfectly fine.
Take a person to a movie, enjoy their company, enjoy their time.
Right. I mean, and honestly, this is something I say every time on the show too. It's all your relationship is a negotiation between the two of you, not you and the internets and your girlfriends and your boys and all. You know,
don't get so caught up in the outside stuff because ultimately, if you're building a thing, and most dating is to build a long-term relationship, you're building a thing where it's going to be just the two of you. Yeah. Now you have support, you have outside assistance,
right?
But it's really got to be a you and me versus the world in a way, and don't get too caught up in that either because that's its own thing where you're shutting out probably what could be good voices and good support when you're thinking, no, I got to only make decisions for just us.
There's got to be a balance.
Yes, definitely. All things in life have to be balanced.
Facts.
And in that same way, relationships do. So we saw a lot of movies together. That was how the relationship worked. And because we were able to enjoy our time and space like that, because you were a girl who didn't mind going to Frisch's.
Yeah.
And doing the salad bar early in our relationship. She's way evolved beyond that now, but early in. That's another thing when you talk about like people trying to date in like their 30s and 40s. It's like, you're past the time where you're not going to be able to just take you to a simple Frisch's breakfast.
But you think about like, you know, we were 19 years old. We just kind of wanted to get to know each other to see if this thing was going to go.
We kind of thought of that as a decent place to eat.
Yeah,
because you could sit and talk and it wasn't that loud. You could sit and talk
and do the breakfast buffet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so, things have changed. That's why I'm so glad to not be dating in the current market because
oh my gosh,
I would not want to navigate that because now I got to decide like, oh shoot, am
I blowing my wad on a girl I don't even like?
Is Olive Garden too low class for you? I don't know. Like I think a decent Olive Garden dinner.
Well, and then let's say you do blow your wad and you don't even like her.
Like, yeah. A lot of times people,
Chris, but this is the worst date I've ever been on.
Right.
That's $200.
A lot of people suck at compatibility in choosing a mate.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I've been thinking about a lot when I watch Manosphere things, which I stopped. I was watching a lot of Manosphere stuff for quite some time.
Yeah, you were over.
Just because I was so curious at the why and the how.
Yeah.
And I could filter out, like, some of this is decent information. Some of this is, so much of this is horrible information.
Yeah.
But they would often be talking about the criteria by which you choose. And most of them are not talking about good criteria.
Yeah.
For choosing a long-term partner.
Yeah.
Particularly it's like guys are attracted by looks, but you need something deeper than just physical attraction to make this thing last.
Right.
So you got to be attracted to this person, and they got to like you, and you got to be compatible.
Yep.
And that those compatibilities, some of those compatibilities for who you are, and we've talked about this on the show before, as you evolve, they're going to change because your needs are going to change. So as you enter kids into the picture, and so it's like surprising to me to think about, like, I could have never met a woman at the bar and really thought it was going to be a good long-term connection. Yeah. Because I'm not a bar person.
I was going to say you would never be at the bar, though. Yeah. That's.
And so the idea of, like, meeting my, future wife at the bar as a person who goes to bars regularly, which just sounds and feels like a weird proposition. Yeah. I always knew when it came to dating that I was good in the room. Like, if we can just have multiple conversations,
but you got to get there.
Then a person's going to like me. But like, I'm bad at cold starts. So the idea of, like, just walking up to a girl and be like, hey, hi. I like you. You like me.
Can I buy you a drink?
Can I buy you a drink? Yeah. Who are you as a person? Nah, I'm not good at that. I'm a slow burn.
Drink. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the one thing that college provides for interactions, right?
Yeah. As we built that system, right? That's one of the things that it provides as an alternative to, it puts 20-somethings in the same place with each other
at the same time
to bounce off each other and to do some selection.
Yep.
You would do it in the workforce. I mean, because it happens.
Right.
And, a lot of people, I think I've heard this a lot too, this idea that you shouldn't marry your college or high school sweetheart because you might miss out on something. Yeah,
I've read that somewhere before too. It's
essentially pervasive in our understanding of relationship dynamics. Yeah. I don't know that it's accurate, though.
I don't know that it's accurate either.
Maybe we're saying that from a place of we were both two people who knew each other in high school, met in college, now are married with 3 kids.
And our grandparents did it. Yeah. Our parents did it.
Right.
I mean, so there's this generational shift where they're saying, oh no, the grass may be greener.
Yeah. Well, they hoped.
Right. I mean,
that the grass could be greener.
If you're compatible, you're compatible.
If you're compatible, you're compatible. And some of those compatibilities are based on some of these, like some of who you are now as an emotional creature is based on who you were in middle school and high school.
Right. There's some base things about yourself.
Some core things about yourself. Yep. Some core experiences that are had. Some core, these are the things I like. Like, Nicole and I both share a love of 90s music, 90s hip hop, right?
Yep.
And that's not like a basis for a relationship, but it definitely clears out some space for some of the other stuff because now we don't have these. Like that's we don't have these barriers. In many ways because we've had similar growing up experiences. Right. Sometimes there's a shorthand that we can rely on because of some of these shared cultural experiences.
Right.
That's one of the reasons that I say I probably would have struggled to marry or date, to marry a white woman, marry out of my race because I need the shorthand. I need to be able to sort of say to this person, I mean, I know you don't love my rants on critical race theory, but like, how my much I would have to do
you would have
to
do
my white
way
wife
more.
or if I had an Asian wife, like, okay, so let's start here.
You would have to, I mean, not that you don't have to explain it to me, but
I usually have to explain the more academic concepts, but not like the basis of racism.
No, I get it. Yeah. No, it's,
and we've had many experiences over our lifetime.
We have that we can commiserate on.
Yes, definitely. And navigating the workforce together, navigating corporate workforces, and being able to just sort of rely on that place for safety.
Right.
Like I can come back and say, you won't believe what them people's doing at work today.
Right. And I mean, and I think, not to dog anybody that is in a interracial relationship, that compatibility is important to us in our relationship, right?
And absolutely. And for others, they've got other things that can join them, that bring them together,
that makes them work. Absolutely. But for us specifically, it
was valuable to me.
It's valuable to you. It's valuable to me. Mm-hmm. It's
and that was always kind of a thing when it came to dating outside my race. There was always like this extra, like, I got to do an extra bit of explaining.
Yeah. There's this extra leap that you've got to take.
Yeah. And then not that I didn't date outside of my race. I just always kind of do. Also, my grandmother said at one point, don't bring any white women home. And that's not to say that I internalized that advice.
But it was definitely a bee in your bonnet.
Right. Right.
Definitely a bee in your bonnet.
And once again, she's speaking from a generation before.
She absolutely
where
is.
it would have been, it was illegal.
Right.
In her day. Right. Let alone there were significant barriers.
Yeah. Yeah.
To why that we could even have interracial relationships.
Well, yeah. If you think about Granny is 80.
It's actually my dad's mother that said it, but.
Oh.
Yeah. I called her Mama, but she's 90.
Mama was rough.
She was a sharp old lady.
Yeah.
A little bit mean, but also grew up in a different era. So, as I think about like history and dating and things like that, I think, we don't often stop and think of how we know the things we know, which is, a fascination of mine. So some of those early experiences, like I said, they sort of help shape you and what your expectations are.
Right. There are these things that are a part of your experience that inform how you handle things going forward. Yeah. So you dated outside of your race. I did not.
Yeah.
But I also was never approached by a guy out of my side of my race. So
there's a lot of research, particularly recently, that talks about how black women are typically the least hit on by people outside the race.
I saw that
of the groups of women,
there are scales, and
black people are technically at the bottom of the scale, unfortunately. And you get that.
Yep.
And it's not that black men, like, I didn't get a lot of play necessarily from women of the opposite sex, but there were just more women, like by virtue of numbers. I just shot more time, than any, then I could have an opportunity for access. Whereas as a guy, you are more responsible for selection than as a woman you are. Particularly as dynamics were playing out in the 90s.
Right. It wasn't. We were as women
you're an
expecting
anomaly.
You to. Yeah.
Because you did ask me out.
I did.
Yeah.
And you're the only person I asked out.
And it worked out for you.
It did.
Thus far.
Look at us now.
Yeah. So, I think a lot about this stuff, and that's why the Manisher stuff ends up being so fascinating to me, because I'm like, oh, there are pearls in here, but man, it's a lot of dirt too. You're pulling pearls out of the mud.
There's definitely a lot of eating the fish and spitting out the bones.
Because, a lot of these are based on kind of trash ideas and patriarchy and anti women stuff that's like, oh, you're a little too angry. And
I feel like, Kevin Samuels is just, there are things that I absolutely agree with him on.
But he's trying to make a show. So
is just
he's trying to entertain, and in doing that he often will double down on some rhetoric at times that it's like, oh man, don't say that out loud.
Or he'll get on a rant, and it's like, you black women, it's like, oh
and then he says, but I'm just trying to help. And it's like, dude, that's not the way.
I can't hear you.
Yeah. That's not, you're not operating from a place of love. You're operating from a place of criticism. And
that's always the important thing about communication, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to communicate to somebody and help them with something or criticize them, you got to do it from a place of love.
Yeah.
If you say it in a way that's not well received, they can't even hear
what's
you.
The information
so
for?
you're not even helping.
You're just helping your own ego by doing the thing about talking out loud.
Look at you being altruistic. But you're being mean, right?
Yeah.
So
who's it really for?
Right. But speaking of interracial,
relationships, one of the reasons we kind of got on this thought path was because many of you may have seen the slave-themed engagement photo shoot, which really hurt Nicole's heart and blew my mind.
Cannot.
So for those who might not know, there was a couple whom got together to do their engagement photos and went with a slave theme. So white woman, black male. She frees him from his shackles.
Right. Let me get the verbiage for you, because
they decide, and she saves him from the blight of slavery, I guess. I don't, I had trouble discerning what the imagery was truly trying to say. Yeah. But it was stomach turning.
They're the clothing. He's got shackles on his hands.
He's tattered clothing. Yeah.
He's got tattered clothing. She's releasing him from the shackles in the picture. And then And then I'm gonna try not to get too hype,
too fiery.
Here's the storyline: 1842. Days passed and everything changed. Our love got stronger and stronger. He was no longer a slave. He was part of the family. What in the actual entire...
Wow.
What crickets?
Wow.
I mean, and you got to think that they're like, boy, this slaps. This is going to be good. This is going to be hard.
Hot.
It's going to be hard.
It's hot.
And so
they're going to love it.
I mean, and a lot of people, caught wind of this. Black Twitter went crazy.
Yeah, as
Kev
it often
on stage did a great video on it.
Yeah.
I struggle to believe that this is not trolling.
Yeah, you think it's insincere?
I don't know that. I'm trying to find out who the real people are, right? Because if you find out who the real people are, right? I've got this investigative nature, right? Find out who the real people are. Like if they're actors or if there's a model. I mean, they could still be in a legit relationship, but
very often in these internet stories, it's not people who are legitimately trying to make a statement, but instead someone who's trying to just gain attention and get clicks. They're just
trying to get attention by being provocative.
Yes, gets the people going.
Gets the people going.
Yeah.
And I feel like if that's the way that you're going to do it, you deserve all that Black Twitter is giving you. Are you kidding? There's the man. Why would you let her do that to you? There's the woman. Why would you do that to the man you want to marry? And then there's the photographer that's probably like, I don't know. I mean, how could they pay you enough?
Of like a photographer was like, so what? Like, you're trying to do
funny.
what? Like,
he's like, wait, guys, why don't we just do a beach sunset? I feel like
that would be better.
So your family knows about this? You guys, they're okay with it?
Yeah. Yeah, because that's hard to believe that they would people signed off on this.
They got 1,400 likes.
Ugh.
So there are 1,400.
Ugh.
You're going to bleep me out. 1,400 bags. bags that are loving this engagement shoot. And I honestly, out of the 3 people that are in the shoot and the 1,400 people, I don't know who's more disgusting. I don't know who's more disgusting.
It's very interesting because I've had to face this at times. People go through what we call a type of development when it comes to racial identity. And I feel like I've talked about it on the show before, but I don't know. So there's essentially like this awakening that happens to racial issues for people. And part of the reasons that white people struggle so much is that they live in a world that caters to them. So they have privilege. So they don't get to really examine themselves through a cultural lens.
Right.
And for Black people, we are forced to. Our encounter stage happens so much earlier because we would just like to live our lives. And white people, whiteness, even Black people who adhere to white supremacy show up and go, nope, nope, you are different.
Yep.
And
we need to point that out at every turn.
And that there is this process you have to go through to really sort of come to terms with that. And so many people struggle with that journey because it's a harmful journey. Like it's traumatic.
Yep.
And speaking of the shorthand that we had to go through, like both of us have some level of understanding of, our place in that journey.
Yes.
And when you're fully foreclosed at the end, or if you don't end up foreclosed at the end, so that's where you sort of reject your racial identity,
right,
and think that whiteness is supreme, the majority culture is supreme.
You feed into that.
You feed into some of those negative things. So this brother, and it's fascinating.
In the sunken place.
Right. So the sunken place is such a fascinating metaphor for that being foreclosed, where you never really learn who you are as a cultural identity, and you instead embrace the outside culture. So that's part of the process of saying, oh no, the outside culture is better, my culture is bad, so I'm going to reject it. Right. And so it seems like, and one of the things things that I often have to remind myself is that not everybody's at the same place on their journey that I am.
That is absolutely true.
And that's hard. And I'm an educator. So there were times where I was teaching classes where young white students would say things to me that were horrible. I remember a young white girl said, I don't understand why there's a underground railroad museum. Why would they need a museum? And it's like, there are museums for everything. There's a neon sign museum, ma'am.
Why are you upset?
Why do I need to justify?
Why are you upset about it? It doesn't bother you. You don't like the Underground Railroad Museum? Don't go to it.
Well, technically, I told her she had to go for an extra credit assignment. And she chose to use the extra credit assignment to bash the very idea.
Wow.
And so I had to go to my supervisor and be like, what do I do with this? I'm triggered.
Karen.
By this
sit
Karen.
Down.
But also, the supervisor said, she's a freshman who's just now having her first experience with a minority culture. So let's see who she is in 4 years. The idea that exposure via college would, hopefully,
maybe.
But that's also contact theory, and we know that contact theory works to a point. There is a benefit to exposure to multiple
correct
ethnic and cultural groups.
But there's got to be something more
on their the person has to work,
side.
Be open to developing insight, and not once again foreclose on their negative or white supremacist ideals, so that they are unable to embrace. Because at this point, we are at a point in human history where white people have had the most contact with other cultures than they ever have had in human history. And guess what we still have? Racism.
Right.
So we know we can't
racism.
escape. It's a thing that white people do on the internet to not get flagged on YouTube. And
really?
I just think it's funny enough, even though it's often done in bad faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, we still have racism because there is and once again, they close off. They say, I don't need to learn anymore. I know about as much as I need to know. And they've never had to learn. That's one of the biggest frustrations with me, with white people and race, is that they never learn the language and they don't think they have to.
Right. And they don't think that it's for the betterment of everyone.
Yes.
Which
fundamentally, we can give them study after study where they're like, this is hurting you too.
Yeah.
Like on a financial scale, on a emotional, interpersonal scale, like being this person, being this country is hurting the country.
Everybody.
The country isn't allowed to grow as it would if you just gave everybody the opportunities as necessary and didn't keep people in oppressive classes.
Right.
And the country's like, nah, that's, I don't even want to face that as a possibility. So you have this young woman and this young man, and I have to feel like, maybe they got to it together, because people can be delusional together.
They're definitely delusional together.
My brain says undeveloped as far as their racial identity, because for him to agree to it means he's got a lot more learning to do about his racial identity.
Here's what I want to know.
What do you want to know?
Where is his mama?
Oh.
Where
maybe
is
you don't
his
have a
grandma?
Mama.
Okay, I'll take that.
Maybe you don't have a mom. We don't know. I'm speculating.
Because we have yet to learn who these people
really
are.
I am assuming that he is in that place of rejecting blackness, and his idea of blackness is slavery, right? And so in doing that, he's saying, I'm shedding this image of what you might think of me as, and I'm going to be something better.
I finally got my white girl.
I mean, in that is a certain amount of yes. And of course, the white girls love stuff like that.
There can't be racism if I can finally do this without the shackles. And
right. It's
not illegal anymore. But it is
in many ways rejecting the parts of blackness that aren't at all about slavery. And that's one of the things that is frustrating on both sides, is that, white people always get frustrated. Like, why do you always bring back to slavery? It's like, I wish I didn't have to, but man, was it a stain on this country?
Because if you got it, then I wouldn't have to keep bringing it up. Yeah.
I thought this on my walk today, but it's like white people get mad that black people have the race card to play. Like, they don't have tons of other cards that they're constantly playing. Like, how about my came from a stable 2-parent home card, my parents had generational wealth card, we just happened to be the right pilgrims who came off the ship at the right time cards.
Are cards nonetheless.
Or we just, because we were Irish, we got to be white earlier than the Italians did card. Or there are a bunch of cards you get to play, and some of those happen to be race cards, right? So she's going to be all for let's do this anti-slave, because they see it as anti-slavery, not an endorsement of slavery. And so...
Do they?
Yeah, they definitely do. They don't think that they're promoting slavery. They think they're promoting leaving slavery behind, which they think all of us should do. Can't we all just get along?
I just want to throw up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because it's what I mean, there were some rappers who recently did a slavery photo or video shoot.
I saw that too.
And it's like, oh,
and
guys,
I was just as disgusted. But you know what?
On one hand, it's like, I see you. You're trying to evoke provocative imagery in your art. And that's what artists do.
Yeah.
And we're also allowed to feel like it didn't quite say what you thought it said and ignore you. So let's do that. Let's do that.
I think
let's do that.
Here's my thought process. You sort of, you know how they say when it comes to work that you dress for the job that you want.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of power in reaching for the status you want, reaching for the respect you want, right? So when you think about Beyonce did that last video / movie / music thing, it was like kings and queens. Like, why isn't that your thought process? Why isn't that something you aspire to? Well,
because she might not have a connection to, he might not have a connection to that idea of blackness. That idea of blackness is a lot more abstract and a lot further back than the last 400 years and the narrative that is fed to most black people about who and where we come from. And because you got the opportunity to learn it, and I got the opportunity to learn it once again, and not everybody knows what you know.
Why isn't that something you want to be? Why isn't it something that you see?
He might not at all connect with that imagery, that discussion.
But why not?
Why? What if he's not been exposed to it in a way that resonated with him as an individual?
Why isn't it something that immediately resonated with him when he saw it, right?
Like, you're once again assuming that people have had the same experiences and by that virtue have an understanding and will resonate with the same things you have, but they haven't.
Yeah, I mean...
And, you can remember the black people from your youth and growing up that just didn't have that frame of reference.
Yeah.
It's the Toni Morrison bluest eye. They were just raised angry and mean, and that's all they knew,
and
that's all their world
all
was.
Things, all things about themselves and their culture and their skin tone and all of that. That
likable,
could be,
that could be nice, that could be, because that was seen as vulnerability and weakness.
Yeah.
Once again, I've said it before on the show, but like my grandmothers were both mean black ladies, but they also grew up hard in a world that was traumatizing. They had to be.
Absolutely.
And so, when my mother's mother pokes fun at like me having a beard and a mustache and hair, it's like, oh, to her, there's a danger to me looking this wild.
Yeah.
It's not a statement of fashion for her. It's I've decided to make myself look scarier to white people.
Yeah.
So she's seeing through that lens of trauma, whereas I'm like, oh no, I'm just allowed to make this choice because Cornel West exists. But she doesn't have that same. I work at a college campus. I also couldn't do this if I had to go into work every day at Wendy's.
Right.
You know what I mean? They'd be like, no, you need to wear a hairnet and or shave all that off. Right. Like, so I do have some privilege cards I get to play in my experience because I became Dr. Rich.
Right.
But it's the idea of understanding that there are different. So one of the hard things about being a human being on this planet and we have a limited consciousness that allows us to only experience the world through the lens of our experiences. So when you see people with these types of experiences who make these choices, you go, what was their experience that led them there? And it's hard not to say there could be anything that justifies what they said or did. And sometimes, yes, okay, murder, okay. But like some of this stuff is like, oh, ignorance. Was it willful ignorance or was it they just didn't know?
Okay, so
they're not there yet.
You brought up a very interesting perspective when you talked about your granny and her perspective about the hair on your face and all that kind of stuff. When you said, oh, she was probably talking about how your appearance could change how you get treated, all that kind of, like, I understood that. Also because I have experiences with that and all of that. So I guess there is something to be said for trying to understand where this guy has come from, what his experiences have been. I'll give you that. Fair enough.
And I think it's hard. One of the things
it's still hard to swallow, though.
Yeah, no, it is. It is because there's a part of us that gets triggered on this very visceral level. Like, how is this allowed to happen, and what does this mean? Well,
and there's so much to be. Honestly, I think what really sticks in my craw is the idea that every day I have to humanize myself at my job.
Yes.
I have to humanize myself in the jewelry store. I have to humanize myself in so many places. And slaves were never seen as human. Why would you ever, right?
associate yourself in that way.
Associate with, yeah. And that's.
But then again, I mean, you know, we play slaves in movies. You know what I mean?
We do, and that sticks in my craw too. But there is something to be said for going back and letting people know what history was. That's different.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's the way
I think that's what they thought of it.
Like, this is
I think
history,
that's how they thought of it.
And
we are
allowed
honoring
to
the history and showing the triumph, right? Like, he thought of himself as like a Django Unchained kind of thing, where he's breaking the shackles.
I love Django Unchained. It was absolutely.
It was a good time.
It was a black person's dream, I feel like. We've always wanted
As
to have that.
filtered by a white person. Thank you, Quentin Tarantino. For taking your shot. And, you know, if he was a Quentin Tarantino, they wouldn't have gave him the money to make that movie. But that's a whole nother conversation.
The movie exists.
And it's good. And I will take a dozen more slave revenge movies if you can get them made.
He got in there and rescued Kerry Washington. Boy, that stuff just felt good.
Yeah. But, you know, also it has its own problems because it speaks to antebellum racism, right? And thus ignores some of the more insidious nature of modern racism, where it's not just, you know, being called the N-word and having an entire organization built on the blacks.
They don't want to talk about modern racism.
They don't want to talk about modern racism.
They don't want to talk about modern.
They genuinely are trying to shut it down,
about
ban it.
Critical race theory, right?
See how I brought it back?
There is no modern racism. I absolutely see it because it's like, what racism? No. You guys aren't slaves anymore.
We did that.
You can marry white girls. You can get a job.
Right.
Those are crumbs. It's your whole entire life.
We've barely been out of legislative racism is still not 90 years old.
Yep.
Right? Like we're not 100 years out of legislative racism.
We're
Jim
not.
Crow
We're
and
not.
segregation.
I mean, and honestly, we could still go. There are so many places we could still go and experience a form of racism that isn't necessarily being called the N-word, or not being able to date outside your race. Right? There are so many other.
1964 was a Civil Rights Act, right?
Wow. So, my mom was born in 56.
Yeah.
So because 1965 was
57 years.
Martin Luther King.
57 years.
57 years. Yeah. So,
and we still remember the 80s and the 90s where, you know, once again, Ku Klux Klan had a cross downtown.
Yeah.
So, you know, racism's not that old, y'all.
It's not. Well, and did you see?
Well, okay. Racism's very old. We're not that far away from when it was the law.
It still exists.
And do you really think in 50 years you can abolish the consequences of laws made to oppress a particular group of people?
Right.
And the consequence that has had with America, because America doesn't know what it's missing when it does these things to an oppressed group.
Right.
We've been over time, so we're going to have to go to commercial, but we'll be back with more of a lively conversation with the Hall Space Podcast. Thank you for listening, and
see you soon.
Welcome back to the Hall Space Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Hall, and I'm here with my lovely and capable co-host,
Nicole Hall. Thanks for joining us for the second half.
Yes, where we continue our lively conversation about racism in America.
Yeah.
America.
Right.
If we were to use the Ice Cube.
There are 3 Ks in that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going with the Ice Cube. So yes, we were talking before the break about how, you know, America struggles with discussing racism, how blackness often is a struggle. And that, you know, one of the things that I was trying to sort of make sure that I said was that people are at different spaces with their cultural identity.
Correct.
Black people, white people, Asian people, we are all sort of navigating our identities, and that some parts of those are more malleable than we tend to think about them because we are understanding ourselves as cultural creatures as we move through the world. So it's a part of one of our many identities, just like, you know, you had to come to terms with some aspects of yourself as a woman. I had to come to terms with some aspects of myself as a man.
Right.
You know, I had to come to terms with some aspects of myself as a person from Ohio. You know, when you have exposure to people who aren't from your space.
And there are people that are coming to terms with the aspects of how they identify, their gender or
sexuality. Like that's one of the benefits of discussions about intersectionality. Another thing that gets tossed that people against CRT want to toss out. They want to toss out intersectionality, even though it gives us a much better and richer understanding of who we are as creatures. And there's some people who don't want to think about that and don't need that insight about themselves because they don't want to sit with it. And that's okay. Go ahead. Walk on, my friend.
Identify how you identify.
But for some of us, we appreciate being able to understand, particularly for myself, because I've always struggled with there's a part of humans I don't understand. And these concepts and theories give me a way to better understand and articulate the human experience.
Right.
And so I'm a person who thinks deeply about it. Not everybody can do that, will do that. Not everybody wants to sit with that ambiguity.
Right.
I'm not telling you have to, but I am saying it's beneficial that it exists, and banning it doesn't make it go away.
It absolutely does not.
And so we
not discussing it doesn't make it go away.
It actually makes things worse.
Yep.
I know that because I spent most of my childhood not discussing it, and it was always still this specter over my shoulder that was certain nonverbals, looks that people would give me, or ways that they would treat me, or ways they would just sort of divert the black kids in this direction and you know, treat you differently. So those non-verbal just sort of behavioral racist acts, microaggressions, we often call them, still exists. Black people are still experiencing them, even when you don't have open conversations or dialogues about who and what they are.
Right.
And part of the thing that people often say is, well, they're always going to be there, so what's the point? But it's like, no, as a
because
society,
talking about it more will bring awareness.
Yes.
And thus change for a good percentage.
And as a society, we've baked out a lot of things that humans would naturally do to become this civilized. That means that there's more growth to do if we want to truly transcend to the next level of whatever civilization is supposed to be. It will be by embracing some of these differences.
Right.
And I think it's hard not to, for me in particular, to not want to have many of these conversations. So look at you. I'm bringing you into the conversations about critical race theory. Ooh. Here's the thing. It's not really about critical race theory. It's about some of the other stuff. They've just packaged it.
Right.
I mean, the guy, Chris Rufo, one of the guys who started this, he genuinely said, I am trying to make it so that every time you hear what you think is an absurd point about race or identity, that you automatically tie it to critical race theory. He wants them to be ignorant to these concepts so that he can essentially have a flag to wave.
Right.
So that his agenda, however, and I always hate, there's always this milquetoast white man at the front of these agendas.
Right.
That's my issue with Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro and now Chris Rufo. These white men who have been born in privilege. They don't have to face
on things
the
that
world.
They don't
and
ever
they just
experience.
Have these strong opinions that people agree with, and they get a platform. And then they get to say that they're oppressed in that platform because people criticize them occasionally, as if that's the same as, say, being abused or being enslaved or whatever. And they get to evoke the imagery because they know how to manipulate the language in a way. So that's why, all three of them are people that I want to fight on site. And I don't want to fight many people, but they are among the people I want to fight on site because they evoke within me that, oh God, you get to do this. And if they just decide to stop one day, there will be no consequences. But I don't get to lay this skin down.
No, you don't. You're still going to be a 6-foot black man walking around the world.
That people are frightened by.
There are people that are going to treat you differently. They're going to,
I thought about it today in the grocery store because there was this white girl who walked by me and she basically looked like Wednesday from the Adam Family. Except she had like a short haircut. And if I wasn't a 6-foot tall black guy, I'd be like, hey, you killed that look. like you got it. I don't know if you thought you got there today, but you got there today. So I can't wait till I'm a 65-year-old black man who,
that's
you know
different,
what I mean?
Right.
I'll be considered whimsical. But as a 40-year-old black man, I look weird. Just walk up to this white girl like, hey, you look good there, little girl.
It's just like the character on SNL.
Yeah.
Where he's playing the old black guy. He says all kinds of inappropriate stuff, and they're like, "Oh, that's just heroin."
Right. That's right. That's just the way he is, and it's like,
That's
but nobody else can say that. But I mean, ultimately, I don't want to be able to say inappropriate things, but I do want to be able to just sort of be myself, without having to fear that people are going to see it through the lens of tall black guy, is saying something to me.
Alert.
Yeah.
Alert. I think the biggest thing that upsets me, and it's similar to what you were saying, is that anybody that speaks on something that they don't have an experience with and they don't want to understand that experience.
The willful ignorance of the experience. By virtue of their privilege, they don't have to. They don't have to think that there's another side.
Because they can lay their mic down and walk away.
Yeah.
And still be treated the same.
Right. We'll always have access.
Absolutely.
To the doors will just fly open for them.
Absolutely.
Whereas many of us have had to fight for the opportunities that we have.
Right. In the face
of people having these lowered expectations for us.
Yep. It's just like there was recently a white guy who snuck into the listening party for Donda. For Kanye West.
I saw that, yes.
And
so Kanye West has a new album that is supposed to drop soon. He's still mixing it. He's being full Kanye West about it.
Absolutely.
He recently had a listening party at Atlanta's Superdome, whatever place. I'm blanking on the name of it.
Yeah.
And he, sold it out. 70,000 people came to see him stand in the middle of the
play music
court and just play his music and vibe.
It wasn't a performance. It was
just him vibing.
Listening.
And on the one hand, there's a part of me that 20-year-old me would have been like, yes, I want to be at an experience like that. 40-year-old me is like, what is this guy doing? What is he doing?
At this point, if I go to a Superdome, I want you to perform.
You want a full concert.
I want a full concert.
You better play all the old hits. You better drop only
one
or two of these new hits.
Bring Jay-Z out. It was fire, by the way. The Jay-Z verse was, I loved it.
But still, and so we have expectations, but also everybody's been in quarantine, and so there hasn't been as much entertainment. So of the times to pull a stunt like this, where you just give a raw, unfiltered thing, good time to pull that trick. And so people are like, he's a genius, or is he just a guy who knows how to capitalize on the moment? It's always been his thing. He capitalizes on the moments. Totally. Musically, he's sound, but
and if people are willing to pay for it,
let him have it. Let him have it. So he has it, and we'll see what the album's like. People are excited, but there's also not a lot of new music coming out because people are still recovering from a quarantine. So be that as it may. But the white guy snuck in.
He snuck
in.
And
it was in part, we all know it was in part because a white guy with equipment is allowed to move through certain spaces without being interrupted.
So it ended up on the Shade Room, and that was the biggest argument about it because he recorded this whole process, right? So he had put this picture of something. Scammed. He has big camera equipment. He scammed it to a bunch of places, and part of what he was saying was, when you walk into a place, you got to be confident and walk fast. So
and
that you look like you be there. And I agree with that.
Looking white helps.
He is the whitest white boy with camera equipment. Absolutely. He should have been there, right?
White helps.
It absolutely helps.
Yeah.
It absolutely helps. If you could walk around as a white guy all day, there would be so much stuff that I believe that you could get away with.
Well, with my current attitude, yes. Yeah. I mean, and it's not to say that I haven't occasionally, gotten myself into a backstage access in something that I've done before.
I mean, we've snuck into stuff before. Some of it is like confidence is key. Confidence is key. Keep walking. Yeah.
But your percentage of the hit rate goes up if you have the complexion for the protection.
Right. And honestly, when I first saw the video, I was like, oh man, he snuck up in there. He got some really good shots of Kanye. And then when I started scrolling through the comments, I was like, it's because he was white. I was like, oh yeah. He can walk into anything.
Now that I think about it, he's allowed into access to a lot of things that we wouldn't have the same access to.
So the Tucker Carlson.
It's not just because he's white, but I mean, it helps. He also had a lot of equipment. He also had a lot of equipment. He had Photoshop and printing equipment in his car. So he was, he came prepared.
And he got some good photographs. So, I mean,
for what it's
worth,
Yeah. So, it also says like, man, rappers don't have the greatest security, do they? Like, that's where my brain goes. Like, oh yeah. So they're going to tighten up security now that he's done it.
Well,
ideally.
Because he went viral.
Yeah. I mean, which is kind of what he wants.
How you get a better seat than
once
Kim
again,
K?
we're in an attention economy. It wasn't really a seat. He was there he went in under the guise of working. So when you work, it's not really considered a seat. You're there for the job.
You're on the floor.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, he thinks that's what, That's what the artist thinks you're there for.
Yeah.
And the artist has no way of knowing all these people. Like they spend their time around a bunch of other people.
Well, yeah, no, that's somebody else's job.
Know personally.
There's no way that they can be responsible for that. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
And so I wanted to circle back to, one thing. Jeff Bezos went to space. So ultimate white man privilege, just using his privilege to go to space. I was going to say, talking about white privilege. Paid $5 million to go 60 miles into the sky to, run along the rim of the atmosphere and call it space.
He paid money
for a rocket. He paid the money that you paid him for everything you bought from Amazon in the last year. And me, we all did it. We're all complicit.
We're totally all complicit, and I feel dirty. I'm not gonna still stop buying from Amazon because
they have us over a barrel, man.
They do. They
we don't have to.
But I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest thing people were saying was he could eradicate hunger.
He could with that same amount of money.
With that same amount of money,
everybody could have gone to college for free.
Right.
Like he could have erased. He could have
paid people's student loans. Debt. He could have paid off people's houses. Yeah. He could have. Yeah.
Yeah, but he chose to do a thing for himself.
No.
Which is what we allow rich people to do all the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing about rich people is that they get more free stuff
for being rich.
Any of us.
Because we reward success, Nicole. And they're obviously a success. Otherwise, they wouldn't be rich. I mean, come on.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Or there's this modern racism and this generational wealth and this...
No. They're successful because they have money. And so long as they just make it look like money, like say Trump, then they're going to get even more stuff and maybe even get access to the highest seat in the land. You just got to make it look like it's all about appearances.
I tell you what, I mean, I guess...
Because Trump is cash poor, by the way. Just so you know.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, American Greed wouldn't be a successful show without these white folks pretending that they have money or stealing money from other people.
Sometimes it makes you wonder, like, who actually has money? You know what I mean? Like
real dollars.
Who are the real, because the real rich people are the people you never see at all. Like they're not celebrities. They're above. They're the person who pays the celebrity's check.
Yep.
He wears it. He wears the same
Louis
tie.
Despositos of
every
the world.
Every 3 days. Louis Desposito. Nicole's fascinated by Louis Desposito. He's the guy in Marvel movies. He shows up as producer of every Marvel movie.
On every single movie. So he just gets paid. And every single show.
And if you watch
nobody knows what he looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And same with Ike Perlmutter. Nobody knows what he looks like. The other guy who used to run Marvel before Feige had his coup to get him pushed aside.
Yeah, got it kicked out.
There's not a recent picture of him on the web.
Because he is minding his business, being rich, doing rich people stuff, and not flashing it, right? Like he's not. Yeah, they're not out there like I'm in Dubai
because they know the benefit of their kids and their kids' kids are out flashing it, and so they give us prime content.
They do, but yeah.
But yeah, so, peak white privilege to be able to have a rich family that helps you start a company. Say you did it from your garage, make billions and trillions of dollars, and then fly to space with it, because that's what the rich people are going to do. They're going to leave us behind if they can, because why wouldn't they? I mean, come on. We'd all do it. Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to go to space. I don't want to go to space. Space, I know space is scary.
Yeah.
Because
you're surrounded by nothing but
you're really far away from your stuff, and it's literally like if you trip in the wrong direction, you're gonna fall and not stop.
Yeah.
Like if anything happens, you're untethered. Like any number of things can happen, and you're just gonna tumble into the void until you suffocate because your oxygen runs out. Like it's literally we live on this planet, and this planet's trying to kill us, let alone space, which is not made for us as creatures at all. And once you go up there, it's just like, it's indifferent. It's just, you're just, hey, sorry.
You just gave me so much anxiety.
Did I? About space.
It's not hard to give me anxiety.
Right. I gave you anxiety about space.
The whole idea of like floating in this black void until you just stop breathing.
There's nothing to stop you.
I've been falling for 45 minutes.
Right, for 30 minutes. I've been falling for 30 minutes. You could literally just keep tumbling out. And
it's nothing but black.
What's going to stop you?
I don't know.
It's not even like floating away in the ocean, because ultimately, like the ocean, like
that scares me too.
Yeah, I don't know. Being swept away in the ocean scares me.
I've never been on the ocean and not be able to see land. Yeah. I think like being on a cruise or out on a boat where I can only see water, I think that'll terrify me.
Yeah. And you
Not that I don't want to do it.
What's funny is that you keep saying, I want to go on a cruise. And I'm like, you do understand. We will be in the middle of the ocean. Nothing but water on every horizon.
Yeah.
All around you, 360 degrees.
Yeah.
As far as the eye can see.
There's this part of me that feels like I have to experience it. But you're not going to get me on a cruise right now.
Yeah, no.
You can forget that.
You don't want to get the Delta Lambda Gamma variant.
I absolutely don't want to get
roll the dice.
Did you hear that it was once called the Indian variant? Really,
I did not hear that. But I mean,
stop doing that, y'all. Stop
come
naming stuff like that. Just
this is America. Don't get you slipping, yo. Look what I'm whipping now.
Oh my gosh! But it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah. No, it's everywhere.
Oh my gosh,
it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I was going to take the kids to Sharon Fest, which wasn't today. It was yesterday, Friday and Saturday. Mm-hmm. And so I thought about taking them yesterday, but then the idea of the Delta variant, Gamma variant, it's like maybe we just wait another year. Maybe we just don't try and jump back into these things.
The festivals
are happening. They've opened up all the festivals now. And I love festivals. I love taking the kids to festivals. I love getting access to funnel cakes and things.
I remember you said
they just started them. They just they're ramping them up, and whoever can get one done by the end of the summer, they're trying.
Yeah.
And, some of them won't be returning at all, which is unfortunate. But quite a few of them they pulled off. They had Cincy Soul this weekend.
They did, and downtown was packed with
and I'm like,
people.
And vaccinated and safe.
We're fully vaccinated, absolutely, but still scared.
It's 99% effective. What's that 1%? Because if you get the 1%, it might be bad.
I feel like
rolling the dice.
We're just comfortable enough to go out. But the number of times that we go out,
you're upping your risk every time.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, we did Chicago.
Where do you go and how close to people are you?
That's true.
You enclosed or
That's
not?
True.
Like,
That's true.
Can you limit exposure as best you can?
We're gonna try to go to the beach, and we're gonna try to find the least populated beach part of the beach, which is normally North Beach. But
we'll see.
It's
Yeah.
I want to get back out in the world, but I need to.
But the world's not quite ready yet.
Not quite ready yet. Yeah.
There's one last topic I wanted to breach before we wrap up here. There was this interesting thing that happened online in the spaces that I entertain, and I sent it to you, and I said we should probably talk about it on the show.
Yeah.
But we didn't get a chance to get to, well, this is our chance now to get to it. There was a guy on the line that I found out about this week called the Situational Therapist, who does a lot of stuff on he does a lot of his posts on Instagram and TikTok about child abuse and trauma, particularly in the Black community. So he's a Black therapist, aspiring therapist. I think he is now officially a therapist. He's licensed, but I'm not sure. I don't think he's a PhD psychologist. Anyway, like I am. And he got into this argument with Conscious Lee, who is another TikTok speaker who speaks a lot about conscious Black issues, which then led to a conversation with Wayne Brady, so it was like very interesting. Like they got into this argument because they were essentially talking about that idea that when you're young and Black, you often get rejected by women if you're nerdy or not typical Black.
Right.
And I could do a deep dive on what we identify as Blackness.
Right.
And one of the things that he said was that often people's idea of Blackness is rooted in Black supremacy. So it's rooted in some of these ideas of us as ignorant, as, angry, volatile, tough. You know what I mean?
The toxic masculinity.
The sort of toxic masculinity version of us as Black people. And when you aren't the person who fits that mold, then you're often rejected by your peers. And so the original post that started was a guy saying, no, women didn't dislike you because you liked anime. They didn't like you because you were weird and you had a bad haircut. And, this led to situational therapists kind of coming back and saying, well, some of this was we were abused. We were bullied by Black people.
Right.
And so this is kind of inside baseball. So, Black people, we know what we're talking about. White people don't feel like you need to be a part of this conversation necessarily. But as I talk about it and think about it, I'm thinking about my own experiences growing up.
Right.
And I know, you've had some of those experiences too, where within the Black community, we were often treated poorly for, say, being articulate.
Speaking. I was going to say speaking well. I knew exactly what you're about to say.
I want to say speaking well because it isn't necessarily about speaking well, because I do believe that AAVE, African American vernacular, is a thing. Like within the Black community, we have a rule set on how you're supposed to use words.
Correct.
Right? So you can speak well in Black language.
Okay. I see
and
what you're saying.
oftentimes it's funny because white people try to talk AAVE and they don't get it right. And, you know, white people don't quite understand the sort of nuances within the culture because they've been taught that it's wrong,
right,
fundamentally.
Right.
And yet there was always this struggle, you know, around my own experience of blackness, of how black we have to learn when to turn up our blackness, when to turn it down.
Turn it down.
We learn that with white people, and we also learn it with black people.
Yeah. You can't go into the barbershop and speak the same way.
I can't go in the barbershop. It was actually funny. I was in the barbershop with the kids a couple of weeks ago, and the guys were talking Marvel movies, and it was the first time I had met some of the other barbers, because my barber doesn't know Marvel movies. So we can talk about things, and he's actually a really smart, articulate guy.
He is.
In AAVE. And he can speak, you know, when he needs, he can code
turn
switch.
It off. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But he prefers the sort of relaxed vernacular.
Right.
But then the other barber speaks more like me, and I'm like, oh, hey, where'd you come from? Yeah. And suddenly I feel a little more comfortable, but it's the first time meeting him. So I don't even know, like, how deep into this can I get? Because I got
how far
theories.
Can I gotta go?
We're talking Loki now. Can I talk some Loki theories? Yes. Okay. So yeah. And well, how much do you know about the comics? Because I'll get deep into it. Are we going to meet the tribunal? Are we going to, you know, the living tribunal? Is he going to show up? Whatever.
By the way, that first episode of Loki was fire.
Nicole's finally watched Loki, so we're trying to get her caught up. I usually wait till the series are over to have her watch them, because she could not. She just asked me too many questions if she had to wait week to week.
Why are they doing this?
Yeah. What's going to happen?
What's going on?
So what did the comics tell you?
I don't understand it.
Is that in the comics?
Oh my
what does
gosh.
it mean? And I'd be like, I don't know.
What does it mean?
Right. I don't actually know. I'm watching this as you are in real time.
Hey, listen, last night I didn't ask any questions. I was just...
Yeah, she was like, I need to watch another episode, but I'm too tired. And I'm like,
I
okay.
couldn't make it through another episode, but I just mouth agape. It was very good.
Yes, it was a very good show.
Very good.
So I often use the barbershop as a good meter to help people understand that experience, that when you're black, even when you're in black spaces, you have to learn how to turn it up or down.
Right.
And that there is often we're a very resilience driven culture. So weakness is looked at, any vulnerability is looked at as weakness, and we don't tolerate it.
And you'll get ostracized for it.
You might get ostracized for it, or you fear ostracization.
Yeah.
So some of that, once again, goes back to having those formative middle school and high school experiences where the ostracization was so much more profound. Right.
You felt it to your core at that age,
because your identity is still so malleable.
Right.
And one of the things that I try to do in my practice and in my work with young teens is, okay, so this isn't going to matter forever. So I know it hurts, but I need you to develop some range, because now there's a host of things that people could say and do to me that I would just be like, oh, that's you. I'm going to be me.
Yeah.
But I also have a much more resilient core now, because 43, almost 44 years old.
Yeah.
At 15, these things were devastating assessments of my character and my identity.
Right. And one of the things that you don't quite understand as a teenager at that time, because the sense of self is so malleable, is that you get to choose and determine who you are and become okay with that.
And it's always a choice.
It's always a choice.
Now, at a certain point, you know, your choices might be limited by a variety of factors.
Absolutely. But you get to know what those things are, and you live with it.
Ideally, if you're paying attention.
Well, yeah.
Not everybody's paying attention. Some people get locked into those choices.
All of this requires introspection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, at this age, or you get to a certain point, or you hope to get to a certain point where what other people say and how you're viewed is it doesn't move you, it doesn't bother you.
Yeah,
in
ideally.
such a way.
Some people get broken by it. So some people
do.
You know, they say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but a lot of people are traumatized by those young experiences where they were ostracized. I mean, hey, young guy who's getting a slavery photo shoot might have felt rejected by black people, and so he's found this white girl who a lot of times accepts him. Yeah. And so now, once again, going back to that conversation with consciously and situational therapists, like they're talking about, you know, how do black people deal with that rejection they get from the black community, because it definitely happens. It absolutely happens. And there are many of us who stop and go, wait, what's with me that I can't be accepted in this space? Right. There are many of us who go, well, forget it. I don't need that space. Once again, as you go through your examination of your racial identity, that you stop and go, but like, is it me? Is it the culture?
Or is it you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or is it others?
Like I've often said, for some, it's kind of a mix of all the things, all the factors, because, you know, there were a lot of girls who didn't give me play when I was younger because I was nerdy and was weird and wore a trench coat in high school. And
being a black nerd is rough.
It was back then.
Rough.
It was back then because there was literally no place for you.
Because
it's a little different now.
It is a little different now. The tribes are more visible.
Yes, there are more visible tribes.
Definitely.
That are a little more mainstream.
But I remember thinking, man, this is...
Yeah, but also it's like
different.
There's delineations between nerd and geek, and you know, like are you just into interesting, you know, are you into particular topics that are not mainstream? Are you socially awkward too? Like so many of these factors that kind of slot in that if you can shave, like I shaved off the being socially awkward thing by becoming aloof. Like I just learned like, oh, being cool is actually just being aloof. Like if you just try not to care so much about what people think, people will assume you're cool because you don't care. Oh, okay. And then I'll become aloof. That fits me. Yeah. But I also kind of... There's
a form of self-protection.
Right. And I also kind of knew, like I can choose who I am.
Right.
Not everybody knows that. Some people just, like I said before, assume they have to be this type of person, or they don't even know to change or alter or to shave down pieces of themselves in order to fit into certain spaces.
Yeah. Because there are certain places, like I am who I am, but there are certain places, like you said, that you know how to navigate within it. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, we code switch for work. Yeah. Fair enough.
Code switch for work. Like I said, I code switch at the barbershop.
If I'm at the beauty salon, if I'm, like, I mean, I'm into true crime, so I have my own sort of niche. And when I find out someone else is really into it, I completely nerd out in that way. And so some of it is just this human element, but for African American,
finding spaces where you can be comfortable with a vulnerability with your likes, dislikes, and identities.
Absolutely. And so, particularly for African Americans and African American boys, there is this level of being judged and not even being able to speak on it.
Yes, there aren't as many spaces to articulate it. So because that requires vulnerability.
It does.
That requires insight.
Black boys are not allowed.
Often not as allowed. To do that. Which is frustrating. Particularly for me, because now I'm this guy who's actually really good at it. And don't always even have the spaces. Like I have some friends who I'm really good at being vulnerable with, but don't have a lot. And will often be weird in some circumstances where I'm like talking to another black man and then I'm like, oh, this is an opportunity to be vulnerable. I don't know where he's at with that. So it's like now I have to test the waters, and it's like, nope, he lacks insight. So I'm going to just avoid. Like I'll do it to a degree. I'm not going to go so far. I can't go deep with this person because they can't tolerate it. And so it's often weird to me because I have such a small circle when I'm talking to someone who's kind of outside that circle. It's like, oh, I have to meet her again. Where am I going to set the level of vulnerability and openness in this conversation? Because they might not. I don't know if they're ready for it or not. And to try and have the conversation that is, hey, can you accept an inner truth about myself, and by virtue of that, share a truth about yourself? Like that's a lot. That's a long walk for someone that might be a short interaction.
I will tell you, in our chat group, we have these vulnerable moments, and every time you have the opportunity, and every time any one of us become vulnerable, it's like you second guess it. And then you receive positive feedback, and then it allows you to do it again, right? And so the ability to be even more vulnerable, it allows the space for that, you know? And so one of the things that, you know, you want to tell a 13-year-old kid is, okay, so first of all, you're going to find your tribe. And then once you find your tribe, there are going to be levels to this vulnerability that can occur. And once you receive that positive feedback, then you know, this is okay. This can work.
Right? And the internet makes it easier to connect with those people with your shared interests.
It does.
And I always love when I get a young black boy who's a nerd, like, because I can work with that. You know, I've got in my toolkit, like, you know, when they talk sports, I know enough about sports by virtue of having a sports playing family, even though I don't like the sports ball. But It's like, oh, if we're going to talk Yu-Gi-Oh, or if we're going to talk Dragon Ball Z, if we're going to talk Marvel movies, like, hey, I'm with it, and I will pull all kinds of metaphors
100%, yeah.
about left and right. Like, okay, so you're going to be like Iron Man in this circumstance. You're going to go into this circumstance that you're really going to feel vulnerable about, but you're going to put your armor on before you do it, so that you can feel safe there. All right. So what is our armor? Our armor is remember that our mother loves us. Yeah. We remember that our brother loves us. So our armor is we know we're smart, even if they're saying mean things about us. Right. Like, I got a ton of those.
I feel like one of my proudest moments was you were supposed to dress up for superhero for school, and Ra is very, very, very precise. Yeah. You have to have the whole costume top to bottom, right? And he was going as Captain America because he was obsessed with Captain America. Yeah. Totally into it. I loved it. Yeah. But he didn't have a shield because the shield that Gammy gave him, it cracked. It was a really big shield.
Yeah, I remember
plastic.
That.
I mean, he's slinging it around like Captain America, so it cracked, right? Yeah. It's not made of vibranium, okay? No. But so he's like, I can't go to school. I can't go to school as Captain America. I don't have the shield. Yeah. And I said, do you remember the end of Civil War when Iron Man says you don't deserve that shield? My dad made that shield. You need to give it back. And he gave it back. I said, you're at that point, right? And he was like, yeah, I'm Civil War Captain America. Because that was the costume that he had. He just, he doesn't give the shit up until the very end. Right, but,
I think that's one of the benefits of having shared mythology, right? When you know what your kid's mythology is, that you can then tap into a shared experience and use that to help teach them about other experiences. So that's the benefit of us having a narrative brain and sharing stories, because it allows us, when we're faced with adversity, the stories help us remember adversity can be overcome. Right. So that's one of the reasons that I like I said, having nerdy kids when I work with them, because it's like, oh no, I can just pull up, oh, so you remember in the Iron Man movie when he was having panic attacks, right? That's just what was happening to you. So we got to help you center yourself,
and
bring yourself back in.
Just breathe. Yeah.
Just breathe.
Just breathe. Yeah.
So, having these shared cultural experiences, once again, going back to the idea of shared cultural experiences, helps us to bridge gaps.
It does.
And if you don't have those shared experiences, I had a friend for many years who was from Taiwan, and he struggled having regular conversations with me because I dropped so many cultural references. Right. He'd be like, sometimes I don't know what you're talking about. And I would have to adjust and try and
let me explain it
limit
to you.
Or explain. Yeah. But he was not into pop culture in the same way I was. Right. So, we connected on other things.
Yeah. You just find other things to connect with.
And it's always interesting because it's like, this is who I've learned to be over many years of being me. And this is where I'm the most comfortable. But to bridge the gap with you,
I need to figure out
other methods of connection.
Right.
But I think that goes back to that earlier statement we made in the first half, where it's like this relationship worked in part because we had there were fewer gaps to bridge because we'd had shared experiences, grew up around the same era. And even though our paths were not at all the same by any stretch of the imagination, there were enough similarities. And so when I think about the idea of once again, do you marry your college sweetheart or your high school sweetheart? Right. And people say, no, reject that out of hand because you might be missing out on experiences.
Marry who you're compatible with and you build.
Marry who you're compatible with and can build with. Yeah. Because some of that, it's just, you just end up growing together no matter what.
Well, some of that, because you have to evolve. Yeah. That's so,
Right? Going back to our second episode, you got to evolve together anyway. So maybe they are compatible. So I push against some of this, people should being pushed into necessarily new experiences. I saw a thing earlier that says, 10 reasons you should move out of your hometown. And I think for some people, yes, you're the type of ambitious person who needs to. But for some people, there's a lot more in your hometown than you might just be. Because sometimes you get this idea in your head that you're going to go somewhere else and it'll be better. But no matter where you go, there you are. Like if you haven't learned or grown, it doesn't matter if you're standing
it doesn't matter where you
on
live.
a beach or if you're standing in Taiwan or if you're standing in, Europe. Yeah. You got to come to terms with some aspects of you if you want to open up.
I'm better on the beach though.
I know you feel that way.
No, but honestly, I remember thinking that as a teenager, I'm going to move out of Cincinnati.
Because that was much of the language. You had to.
Yeah. And that isn't
the mythology
necessarily
we have
true.
Around. No, it's not necessarily true at all.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the idea that the path isn't set for anyone necessarily, that for many people, you do have choice, as we were saying earlier.
Right.
I definitely want to dive deeper into Black nerddom as
I do too.
this concept of who we are and how we handle,
how we communicate.
Because one of the things that came out of that conversation with the situational therapist was he was saying there is not much room because we don't value vulnerability, we see it as weakness. There's not much room for people to process these experiences when they've been bullied or rejected by other Black people.
Right. Who do you tell?
What's interesting is most people were bullied in some way or another. Like one of the core tenets of being a middle schooler, high schooler is to feel oppressed by forces above you, be it your peers, your authority figures, whatever. Right. So it's just we all feel too vulnerable in that space. Right. And it's such a formative emotional space for us that it's hard to let go of that. It stays with us. A lot of the work I'm doing as a therapist is rewriting narratives for people from when they were, abused and bullied and called names and called ugly and stupid and whatever.
And the interesting thing about that is, you're in middle school, you think you're the only one getting bullied, and you see the popular cute girl over there, and she was getting it rough too, right? Because
we're so at that point where we're building our identity, we're really open to criticism at that age. Yeah. And so any criticism just can sting. And we learn to be resilient as we grow up. But what ends up happening is we end up growing calluses over some of these wounds. Right. And the wounds are still there and easily open. They're scars. Right. And hopefully, therapy helps you heal the scars. Formative experiences helps you heal the scars. Maybe falling in love with the right person who can help you work through that, work through some of that, whatever way you get there. Right. Having a good sound. Like I know my family did it for me because out of all the kids that could mess with me, I had cousins. And even though they sometimes bullied me, it was like I knew I was surrounded by this large field of people that loved me. Right. So there was no person who could be more mean to me than maybe my own cousins could. But I knew they wanted to spend time with me. Yeah, and they wanted to, You know what I mean? Like, so knowing that I came from this large family helped me know that I was loved no matter what people said. Yeah. Yeah. And having, both my parents, which is also a privilege, right? Yeah. Yeah. Who, instilled in me the sense of identity that was, to be a Hall and what that means. I think that's incredibly important. Your base, your tribe, your families, supports who you are no matter what it is. And I think part of that video that you sent, that was the interesting part, was like, there aren't a lot of families, or there aren't a lot of people that experience that same sort of foundation where it's like, okay, there are some things that you like that's interesting, it's different, it's non-conventional, but as you grow and you get, older and you have these experiences, you realize that I am who I am and I'm going to be okay with what that is, right? Yeah. In a healthy situation, the family should provide you with some unconditional love that anchors you, that it comes from the family that you are then able to internalize so that you may unconditionally love yourself. Yep. So. And we need to. That's always a work in progress. Yeah. That unconditional part is the hard part. Yes. Because there are always conditions. Something's always going to come up. Good, bad, and ugly. That will shake that foundation. Absolutely. But if you can instill that core, for parents, if you can instill that core within your child and within yourself, child or otherwise, child, parent, grandparent, whomever, if you can within yourself develop that core belief that you are able to be loved, then and you're deserving of it. And you are deserving of loved, that you are lovable, that people love you, that you can love yourself. Right. Then, to be honest, you will be among the most resilient creatures on this planet, because that's the thing that mostly gets a lot of people is the idea that you are at your core unlovable, because these bad things happen to you. And why would they happen to you if you were lovable? That's my prayer for Ra as he goes into middle school. Yeah, that he will maintain. Yeah. Because a lot of those, if there are some very toxic bullying situations that can really disrupt a young person, unfortunately. Yeah. And he's got this anxiety. And one of the things that he said at Saturday breakfast was, what if people are mean to me? What if the teachers are mean to me? And I said, you know me, right? He's like, yeah. I said, you know how much I love you, right? And he's like, yeah. I said, I would burn that whole school down because I love you. Okay. I know it's an extreme. She's not admitting to a crime, ladies and gentlemen, but she is just saying I mean, that she will go to the ends of the earth to protect her son. Air quotes. Yeah. She does not mean figuratively burn the place down, not literally. Figuratively. Yes. Right. Yes.
That's totally what I mean. But, it gave him a smile. It's like, it's like, I got your back.
But to know that someone has it so that no matter what a person says to you, there is someone that will protect you. You are worthy of protection.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things at that tender age, you just kind of, it's like, hey, don't even just worry about it. I got you. I got you. Okay.
And it does a lot.
Yeah.
To know that you can be loved unconditionally.
It does. It does. And that you can have that conversation, because a lot of times in the past generations, there wasn't the room to even talk about that kind of stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. That's some of the changes that have happened more recently in our contemporary understanding of parenting and self-identity. So I think we've covered a host of things.
We have.
We've gone a little over time today.
Yeah.
But it was a very rich conversation. I'm probably, like I said, I want to continue to come back to some of these topics because they're very near and dear to my heart. I spent a lot of my youth trying to understand blackness and why it felt like it was this hard to grasp thing, as if everyone around me knew something that I didn't.
Yeah.
And what I learned with time and what I now know is they just didn't question it the same way I did.
No.
They just sort of were able to fall into it and made the choice to embrace it.
Or they just didn't show that they questioned it, right?
I think some of them didn't. I think some of them just knew they were black and they knew what that came with. Now, some of those ideas about what blackness were rooted in white supremacist idea of what blackness was.
Right.
But they just sort of knew. They didn't have to stop and go, am I black enough? But by virtue of who I was,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And my connection with it, I did have to question because I would get questioned. If you were never questioned, then you don't start asking questions.
Yeah.
But when you know and you can see that you're not quite hitting the same wavelength that other people are, or when people stop, like I wouldn't stop and wonder if my humanity was different if it wasn't for white people stopping and going, what are you doing here?
Right.
You don't belong, right?
Right.
In that same way, black people would put their hand up and say, wait,
you don't deserve the same. Yeah.
And so when you are othered by everyone in some way or another, it does something to you. It makes you stop and go, wait, what's going on? And if you develop in a way that allows you to sort of feel some level of integration of all these different identities and see the benefits of them, because that's the final step. And it's not foreclosing where you close off and say, I just believe what I believe. It's integrating all these identities and understanding that each of them have something about them that is of value. And that none is better than the other. That's the true transcendence into, okay, I'm okay with myself. But not everybody gets there. It's a long road. And some people never arrive. Unfortunately, some people never even take the journey. They're like, nope, I am what I am. They foreclose early. Because why question? The world's already told them who they are, or they told themselves, or their parents told them, whatever.
And this was going to be.
So, yes, I would love to talk more about subjects like this
because my experience is different than yours. Actually.
But we are over time for today. So we'll talk more about these experiences in another episode. Just remember, there's going to be a live episode in a couple weeks.
For the anniversary.
So try to tune into that. It will be recorded and released as a regular podcast, so you'll have the opportunity to see it. And we'll be doing maybe some more live episodes
It'll go on the YouTubes, right?
Yes, it'll be on YouTube and maybe Facebook. I've learned how to do both, but we'll see.
Yay.
And so with that, ladies and gentlemen,
I bid you a good day. You know what the music means.
You know what the music means. Our time is up.
I say good day, sir.
I say good day. The Hall Space Podcast is brought to you by Hall Productions, LLC. Show notes and credits can be found at our webpage, thehallspacepodcast.wordpress.com. Any questions, comments, or concerns can be sent to us at thehallspacepodcast@gmail.com. The show is written by Dagger Pen Davis. Music is curated by DJ Cabal. The show is produced by Chuck Jones and recorded at Slash and Trash Studios. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you all have a good week. Welcome back to the Hall Space Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rich Hall, and I'm here with my lovely and capable co-host,
Nicole Hall. Thanks for joining us for the second half.
So let me tell you about Anchor Podcast. It's the podcasting service that I use. Anchor.fm is the easiest way to make a podcast, and there are many different reasons why, but foremost is it's free. So you don't need to go out and buy a whole bunch of equipment. If you have a phone or a computer and a microphone. You can record and edit your podcast right on your phone or computer. So that's one major benefit, as well as the fact that they'll distribute your podcast to several different podcasting sites for you. Not only can your podcast be found on Anchor, it can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast as well. So you don't have to worry about going to all those different sites and setting yourself up. They'll do it for you. You can also make some money on your podcast. Say you have a podcast that only 5 people listen to on a regular basis. They don't limit you on how many subscribers you have to have in order to be able to make a little bit of change for your podcast to keep yourself going. So pretty much everything you need to start a podcast can be found at Anchor.fm. So go download the app either in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or go to Anchor.fm to get started. And I guarantee you, it'll make things so much easier for you, like it has for me. Have you ever wondered why humans just aren't who we say we are? Psychologize You is a podcast by licensed psychologist Dr. Ritch Hall and licensed therapist Frank Baker. Join us as we explore why humans human the way we do. Hopefully, you'll learn a little bit about how the mind works, mental health issues, and ways to cope with this thing we call life. Weekly, wherever you get your podcasts.
Love, relationships, the church, the world as we see it today, and many more thought-provoking conversations. This season of Speak Kaya, She's Come Undone Talk Sessions. Coming to your ears soon. Keep watching.
House Hall. We rise brilliantly.